And as I said before, Gabriel Reynolds is a joke. He's a complete joke. You are a disingenuous pig, Chris. Honestly, I do require funding for the channel. You know, I don't get those big bucks like David would. I don't make my thumbnails, and hence why like the channel does need funding. So this channel does need that funding. And he glosses over it, this disingenuous swine. I'm gonna have to insult you now from the fact that you're just being completely disingenuous. You imbecile. I don't have time to make my thumbnails, make the videos. Like, how am I supposed to have time for all that? To edit, make thumbnails, and to produce the content with the research? Obviously, no one has time for that on an individual level. So this has to be the last response against this guy, and no one can blame me for this.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, I want to give a quick channel update. I have been incredibly busy the last 2 to 3 weeks with making content in preparation for an event that's happening in June. And unfortunately, because the event is going to be well attended by people who are a lot more well known than I am, security is a concern, so I can't actually tell you much more than there's going to be a really cool event where lots of apologists get together to talk about Christianity and give polemics against Islam. There's going to be lots of amazing collaboration and lots of great content that's going to come out of that. And me and others will also be giving talks, which will be recorded and they'll be put online for you guys to see. So you have all that to look forward to in the next month. Wish I could tell you more, but I cannot tell you more. Now, back to the topic at hand in this video. I believe I owe Deen Responds, the last bastion of trying to stop the avalanche of apostasy that is being caused by the Islamic Dilemma, that very same Deen Responds, I believe I owe him a response myself, because he actually made a video where he went through and he addressed my points. Now, in my last video where I pointed out to Deen that he hadn't quite correctly understood what the word general means, and that he's actually describing a minority view of affirming the previous scriptures, which in turn means the Quran is not really affirming the previous scriptures at all, which in turn means the Quran is incorrect when it says that it is a confirmer of the previous scriptures. I made that my central point because I think that's my strongest point, and I think if that passes, then Deen Responds has been refuted. There doesn't really need to be much else to be said. If that passes, then Deen's whole alternative Islamic bid'ah innovation that he's been working on hasn't really produced any fruit, apart from all the takfirs he's been getting. I don't really think there's been much use for it, sadly. But to do that, my video was 40 minutes long. It was a long video. And that was after I edited it as much as I could to shrink the size down. Whenever you make recordings, it tends to be very long, and then in the post-production, you edit it down. These are basic principles of editing, Deen. So when I found that your video was 48 minutes long, I sort of thought, how on earth have you managed to do that? And I thought, well, he must have done same as me, just got really caught up in going into the nitty-gritty, the details of this, and then after editing, it was just 48 minutes, so class, it is what it is. But no, you just played my entire video, as far as I could tell. It was the whole thing, and then just gave commentary at random parts, and there's just awkward moments of silence where you don't say anything. You just stare into the distance. Not gonna lie, Deen, if you want to get paid for doing things like this, which, by the way, I don't get paid for doing this, I do this for free. I just spend my time because I'm passionate about it. But if you want to get paid for it, you probably want to edit the videos you make, so it's not just a one take of you going through an entire video and just making random sporadic comments. It's not, I mean, you basically made me watch 48 minutes, most of which you're not even saying anything, most of which it's just me speaking. So you made me watch my own video back just to hear random snippets of your commentary sporadically. But anyway, okay, enough of a rant about the pain you put me through, Deen, to have to watch that video. Let's go through the highlights, Deen, of what you actually said in response, and let's go through it and let's demonstrate why you're wrong and you need to do better and maybe stop being a Muslim. It'd be a good start, generally. Like, really, it'd be a good start.
So, inshallah, let's begin the video now.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to be responding to my good friend, Deen Responds. Now, I'll get to who Deen Responds is in a moment, but this is all going to be about the Islamic Dilemma. The Islamic Dilemma, for anyone who's new or hasn't heard of it before, real quick, it's a massive problem in Islam because the Quran, the Muslims' holy text, happens to affirm the inspiration, preservation, and authority of the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses in the Bible, and the Injeel, the Arabic term for gospel, which Deen agrees with me is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, also in the Bible. But on the other hand, the Quran takes every opportunity to contradict these texts while simultaneously saying it affirms them. This would demonstrate.
So my view isn't that it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I've said it multiple times over, Chris. I'll say it one more time for you. Maybe you know, As I could tell from the debate, you're quite slow in the fact that you couldn't tell that you expose your double standards on the Matthew 23 argument, but I'll repeat it one more time for you. As I said in my intro statement from Imam al-Tufi, it's generally the parables, commandments, and prophecies of Jesus, peace be upon him, found within the Gospels. So it's not like John's authorial notes, John 1:1, or Mark saying his opinion on Jesus' biography, or whatever it might be. So you got that wrong already. It's not even... hasn't even been 1 minute in and you already got something wrong on my position.
So I don't know why, Dean, you got really caught up on this. I'm just pointing out that ultimately you have to accept that the Quran, when it refers to the Injeel that they had with them in the 7th century at Muhammad's time, must have been Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now you can say, well, technically it's not all of it, it's some of it, but you still accept it is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that contains the actual preserved words of Christ. I don't really think this needs to be said. I think you're just being pedantic. The reason why I phrased it this way is because it's in contrast to the other argument that I hear, that I deal with, which is what John Fontaine, Hamza from Hamza's Den, and others often make, including just average layman Muslims, which is that the Injeel is not contained in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It is something totally different. It is a totally separate thing and has no relation to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Anyway, moving forward.
Well done.
The Quran is fundamentally incoherent, it's inconsistent, and therefore cannot be from God, and Muhammad cannot be a prophet, and therefore Islam. Simple argument. It's been around for a long time, and Muslims have not really had any kind of meaningful response to it. But that changes today, because during a live stream where we responded to one of Deen's videos on the Islamic Dilemma, Deen launched a counter-attack of epic magnitude, starting first with his own live stream that lasted 20 minutes, where he said nothing about the Islam, because reasons. I guess he was busy at the time, so he jumped on the live stream just to basically say he acknowledges that we're talking about it, but didn't actually give any response, which was useful, I guess. But that's fine, because he's going to get out and he is going to defend against the Islamic Dilemma at some point.
I've already debated this topic formally with Chris and got demolished, so I'm not interested in debating this formally again.
Okay, so he's not going to defend in a debate against the Islamic Dilemma at all, apparently. Me and Dean actually had a debate long ago. It was one of my favorite debates with great glee. We had some epic moments where Dean admitted there was no evidence for his position whatsoever.
Wait, so Dean, do you have any manuscripts of either the Islamic Torah and Injeel?
Of the uncorrupted form?
Yeah.
No, we didn't have any manuscripts at the time of Jesus, neither at the time of Moses.
No manuscripts. Okay. Do you have any records of Isa's companions quoting the Islamic Injeel?
Of Jesus' companions?
Isa's companions, from your perspective, the Islamic perspective.
Of the companions quoting the Injeel? We have times where in hadiths they're mentioned, in the Quran they're mentioned, where it references times, stuff found within the Gospels. Yeah.
No, I mean,
What are you talking about?
so I'm talking about so we have like church fathers that quote the Gospels, for example. So do you have Isa's companions or some equivalent quoting the Islamic Injeel?
Within the Quran hadiths you're asking?
Anywhere. It can be any writing.
No, I don't see why that would be a condition. No, we don't have anything like
Recorded testimony. Okay. Do you have any evidence at all of any Islamic Injeel or Torah?
that. I just told you, so it's in an unpreserved form, no, we wouldn't have.
No evidence.
And also admitted his own position, trying to resolve the Islamic Dilemma, is, in his words, inconsistent.
Yeah, so the issue is, Chris, you're asking me for a preserved form of the Injeel and Torah when we don't even have manuscripts in the 1st century of Moses or Jesus, peace be upon him's time. So why would we expect to have a preserved form?
So he's now trying to retrospectively defend his own debate that we had months and months ago. I don't even remember, it was some point last year, I think. Don't know why you're now trying to defend your performance in that debate, Dean. Anyway, just to respond to that, why I asked you for any manuscripts of the original Injeel or the original Torah from an Islamic paradigm is because we have manuscripts of our Torah and our Injeel, the one that we believe is the actual Torah and Injeel, from a Jewish and Christian paradigm. And your response is, well, why would we expect to see these in the 1st century? You guys don't even have any of the 1st century. Yeah, that's correct. But I never said 1st century. Why do you alter the claim to make it about the 1st century when I didn't say give me 1st century manuscripts? I said give me any from any period at all. You could have given me 2nd century copies of the Injeel that you believe from your Islamic paradigm has the Islamically acceptable quotations from Isa. You could give me that because it should exist. Surely there was some in the 2nd century? How about the 3rd century, or the 4th century, or the 5th century, or the 6th century, or the 7th, 8th, 9th? We can just keep going. I'm just looking for a single manuscript of an Islamic Injeel or an Islamic Torah that conforms to what Islam says in the Quran. You won't find that, Dean, and you know you won't, which is why I asked you the question, because it doesn't exist. There's nada, nothing, nicht, gone, kaput. There is no manuscripts for your claims. Your claims are without evidence, which is kind of what I was getting at in the debate. And because you have no evidence for the existence of such a thing, I can simply dismiss it without really having to say anything else. That which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Unless you disagree with that, Dean. Maybe you think that making random claims without any evidence where you would reasonably expect to find evidence, again, not the argument from silence, Deen, is somehow acceptable. In which case, I can do the same. I can just say, hey, actually the Quran was originally a Christian text, Muhammad was a Trinitarian, he believed in Paul, but unfortunately Uthman destroyed all the copies of this, and the only thing that exists today is the corrupted form. I could say that. The first thing you'd ask me is, where is your evidence that this supposed Christian Quran ever existed? And I'll say, there is no evidence, but that's totes okay, right? Is it? Is it okay, Deen? You know it's not, Deen. Deen, you know it's not.
The general confirmation of Jesus' statements, it's not. It doesn't have to be.
Wait, so it doesn't have to be a majority?
No.
I thought you said earlier, as long as it was a majority when you talk about the Torah.
No, I was saying that that's a point that makes sense, that you would identify something by the majority of its contents. It's an intuitive point that I'm saying regarding the Torah. It's not a consistent approach where you have to apply this for every single thing.
It's not a consistent approach.
Yeah.
So you have one approach to the Torah.
This is one justification for the Torah specifically. It's not a justification for the Injeel.
But the Injeel is affirmed as a preserved, inspired, and authoritative book like the Torah is. You're aware of that in the Quran.
In a general sense, yes.
But so you can generally affirm the minority part of a book.
No, it's generally affirming a good chunk of the book. It doesn't have to be the majority, as I said.
So a minority.
A minority, if you're saying minority as in less than 50%, I can give you an exact percentage.
I'm asking for exact percentage. Just like, if it's not the majority that you're referring to, it must be the minority. So a prophet can come and affirm the minority of a book.
He can affirm the contents are from God, even if it's a minority.
Which I was pretty happy with, but apparently Deen thinks even though...
Yeah, so the reason why I have an approach for the Torah that's different to the Gospels is I believe there's more truth found in the Torah than there is found in the Gospels. Like, for example, Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he believes that a lot more is preserved in the Torah than the Gospel. That's a similar approach I have, although I believe more corruption than Ibn Taymiyyah believes regarding the Torah. The Gospels, however, went through a lot more corruption. There's a lot less we have of the Injeel found within the Gospels than we have for the Torah in the Old Testament. So that's the justification behind why the Torah is identified as the majority in the contents that it has, because the Quran consistently praises it and talks about it in a positive light, while the Injeel, conversely, isn't praised in the same sense.
Deen. Have you ever read the Quran? Man, I gotta tell you, the Quran is a crazy book. It says all sorts of crazy things about the Injeel. Like, it is guidance and light. The Injeel is guidance and light. I wonder if that's like, I don't know, said about any other popular book. Maybe about the Torah or the Quran. The Quran is called guidance and light. The Injeel is called guidance and light. The Injeel is said to be a revelation from Allah. Christians are said that they cannot stand on anything unless they stand on the Torah and the Injeel.
Like, for example, this verse in the Quran that says, give me a better guidance than these two books. Well, that's the Torah and the Quran. This is never said for the Gospel. Or, for example, the Torah is called Kitab Allah, the one that's present at the time of the Prophet. So for these reasons, the Torah would be better preserved for my paradigm. While the Injeel, I don't believe it would be substantive within the four Gospels. It would be a lot less truth found in there comparatively to the truth that you can find in the Torah.
But trying to say that the Quran calling the Torah Kitab Allah is some sort of unique title that puts the Torah in a different category of preservation or importance or authority to the Injeel is just wrong. As you're aware, Surah Al-Imran, Ayah 3, it directly says that the Injeel is from Allah. It is a book from Allah. If it's a book from Allah, then it's Kitab Allah, right? And again, Deen, the Injeel is called a guidance and light or a guidance and mercy. So is the Quran. And so is the Torah. And the Injeel is authoritative and binding to the Christians both at the time of Muhammad and before the time of Muhammad. That's kind of Muhammad's big argument in the Quran. You ought to follow Muhammad because he's a prophet in your traditions. It is a continuation of the Christian paradigm as well as the Jewish paradigm, which is odd given that rabbinic Jews and Christians are not in the same boat, but Muhammad seemed to think they were. Taking your claim that the reason you have an inconsistent approach to the Torah and the Injeel and you treat them differently, you say that the Quran affirms the Torah because it can affirm the majority of the contents contained within the Torah, and then you swap that for the Injeel and have a different standard, or as you use the term, an inconsistent standard. I'm calling that out because I don't think you realize how ad hoc, bespoke, and arbitrary that approach is, especially since it only works for one of the two previous scriptures you're trying to explain why the Quran is affirming. You can do it for the Torah based on the fact that you think it agrees with the majority of it, but you can't do it with the Injeel because you know it doesn't agree with the majority of it. When you say the Quran affirms the Torah in more positive ways, it gives these unique titles, it talks about the Torah as being just so much better, apparently, compared to the Injeel. Deen, what are those verses that talk about the corruption of the previous scriptures again, that you desperately cling to? Is it Surah Al-Baqarah ayah 79 by any chance? What book is that in reference to? Is it in reference to the Torah, or is it in reference to the Injeel? Because I'm pretty sure, Deen, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's talking about the Torah, supposedly from your perspective that I'm critiquing here. In fact, Deen, how many explicit statements are there in the Quran that actually say the Injeel specifically has been corrupted? I'd love to know that, Deen, because if we go by your standards, we would have to conclude the actual opposite. We would have to conclude that actually it's the Torah that is less preserved than the Injeel, because any potential verses that might be talking about its corruption, this is your belief, Deen, this is what you're saying, you would have to accept exegetes overwhelmingly attribute that to the Torah and to the Jews, and that's the occasion of revelation in Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2, Ayah 79. And that's the strongest verse in the Quran that talks about corruption. So following your logic, Deen, you've just argued against your own position. If I were to actually follow what you're saying, I should come to the opposite conclusion. I should think the Injil's more preserved than the Torah. So it should be the other way around. I should find a majority of what is contained in the Injil to be preserved, but not the majority of what's found in the Torah to be preserved. Notice the bizarre logic you're using here, Deen. You need to be consistent, not inconsistent.
And finally, Chris actually lies about his position, saying that the Quran doesn't affirm absolutely everything in the Bible, even though this is the argument that they always come with. The Islamic dilemma is it's an absolute confirmation. The Quran's making up the scriptures while it contradicts it. He actually had to shift his position mid-debate because, obviously, the response that I'll give. And I'm going to be showing his introductory statement where he never says that the Quran just confirms major components. He just says the Quran confirms everything while rejecting, even on the smallest minute points, of terminologies found within the Bible.
That same Torah and Injeel in the presence of Muhammad are confirmed in the Quran. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that in verses like Surah 7, Ayah 157, Surah 2, 41, Surah 2, 89, Surah 2, 91, Surah 5, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 66, and 68, and many, many more, all demonstrate that the Injil and Torah are present and are confirmed by the Quran directly in the Quran itself. This leads us with no doubt at all that the Quran absolutely affirms the validity of the Injil and Torah. That is present with Muhammad at his time. So we're talking about the 7th century, the 600s. There is a Injil and Torah that are inspired, preserved, or authoritative.
Scholar that affirms your view that the Quran absolutely affirms the Bible.
That was not my view. Never has been my view.
This is just bad. This is really bad. Like, okay, Deen, because you still haven't got it and still haven't understood yet, despite the fact that I've tried to explain multiple times to you, I do believe in absolute confirmation. I do believe in that. So does everyone that I appeared on that panel many weeks ago. We all do. We haven't changed our position. It's still exactly the same. But what I'm trying to get to you, Deen, past your Patreon, past your Discord channel, going directly to your brain, I'm trying to get this idea to you. Both absolute confirmation of the previous scriptures and a general confirmation, Deen, of the previous scriptures, both work with the Islamic dilemma. Both of them are problematic. For you, Deen, both of them are. And you know this because this is why you're trying to say that the Injil, actually it's only this tiny little bit, it's only this little bit, because you know the overwhelming majority of it is not Islamically acceptable at all. And then you show this clip of me during the debate saying, absolutely, yes I did, 100%. And in the Q&A, you asked me if I think that the Quran absolutely affirms the Bible. And I said no. And that's correct, Deen. Because I don't know if you noticed, I talk about the Torah and the Injil. I don't say Bible. And the reason I don't say Bible is because I know, Deen, that you and other apologists will intentionally use that as a weasel word to then try to make it seem like I'm implying more than I actually am. I've been very clear this entire time. And the fact that you can't present that sincerely as my actual view, which is an absolute confirmation of the Torah and the Injil, specifically, Deen, that's why when you asked me, do I believe in an absolute confirmation of the Bible, I said I've never held that view. And that's correct. I never have held it. The fact that you can't comprehend that, Deen, is really concerning to me. Do I need to call someone? Now, ladies and gentlemen, we reach a critical part of Deen Responds video, the bit where he explains why he needs money. live stream that's 20 minutes long. He then made a 4-part video series, but I'm not gonna lie, one of the best thumbnails I've ever seen. He made us all look like gangsters with like guns. He gave us all guns and had us all pointing at him. I'm not gonna lie, dude, you might not have a future in Dawah, but you might have a future in thumbnail creation. If Dawah doesn't work out for you, which it won't, I'll take you on as a thumbnail editor and you can come work for me. We both get to talk about the Islamic Dilemma and you get to use your awesome skills in thumbnail creation. I think that would work out really well. And you'll finally be getting paid, because I know that being paid is a big thing for you, as you say, on every video that I had to watch. All 4 of them.
Subscribe to my page.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, I don't make my thumbnails, and hence why like the channel does need funding. I don't have time to make my thumbnails, make the videos. How am I supposed to have time for all that? To edit, make thumbnails, and to produce the content with the research? Obviously, no one has time for that on an individual level. So
you didn't have to respond to this, Deen. Like, it's me just doing things for fun. Like, you don't have to respond to me saying this. Just ignore that. Like, I may have a dig at you, but I'm doing that because it's fun to have a dig at you, and because I just have fun when I make these videos. Anyway, let's watch this clip.
yeah, alhamdulillah, I have good editors with me, good thumbnail makers. I pay them at the end of every month, alhamdulillah. And it's all thanks to you guys' support. So again, I'm going to emphasize here, like he just mentioned in his video, to support the channel, to make sure this content comes out consistently. I do require funding for the channel.
20 grand? You want 20 grand to make thumbnails? Wait, hang on a second. Did you say it also includes editing of your videos? You mean this video where you have no editing? There is no editing in this video, Deen. The entire video is just you playing my video, looking into the distance and making random sporadic commentary. That's not editing. Whoever makes your thumbnails, they do a great job. You don't need to give them 20 grand. That's dumb. Deen, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for free. You say you don't have time to edit your videos or to make your thumbnails. Bro, yes you do. Yes you do. Sorry, that's a cop-out excuse, and it's obviously you're just trying to bait people into giving you money so you don't have to work. I've seen it with Hamza, I've seen it with other Dawah guys as well. Just accept the fact that you're trying to do this as a grift and you're not actually just putting in the hard work. If you were passionate about this, Deen, you would just do it, like I'm just doing this. I don't need 20 grand to make a video. That's insane. I don't need 20 grand to make 20 videos. That's insane. I don't run a business. I give the Dawah. But hey man, you do you. Don't let people like me tell you how to run your channel, man. If you want to do a business, that's fine. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the next part of Deen response, which is where he basically just makes excuses for things again. Like, he's making excuses for his poor performance. And I wouldn't think any less of you did.
Yeah, Chris, people like you, I could get like an average layman Muslim to refute you and he'll do a good job. Like as shown in the debate, I'm just a random 22-year-old Muslim. You've been doing this for a lot longer than me, right? I don't know how old you are, but you're probably like double my age, if I were to guess, or give or take double my age.
He keeps bringing up that he's 22. Okay, fine, baby Deen. I don't care. Why would I care? You're 22. Bro, I think like in your religion, isn't it like you're considered a man if you're like 15 or something? And you're here saying you're 22 and you're sitting in your basement crying that you don't have time to edit videos. Whereas this 50-year-old is making videos in his own time, not asking for 20 grand to do it, makes his own thumbnails, his own terrible thumbnails, and I do it all for free. It is indeed a general confirmation of the previous scriptures that you seem to love so much. They generally affirm the majority of the Injeel and Torah.
The funny thing is, guys, I respond to that. In my videos, I actually respond to this, and he glosses over it, this disingenuous swine. Honestly, Chris, like, I'm gonna have to insult you now from the fact that you're just being completely disingenuous. You are a disingenuous pig, Chris. Honestly, you looked at my video, you watched it apparently, and then you went ahead and you responded to a straw man. I addressed your point.
Hold up there, Deen. We've been triggered. We got a little bit emotional. In Britain, by the way, we call it tired and emotional. And now you're calling me, what was it, a disgusting pig? What was it? You're showing your inner challengings of your Sunni Islam. It's coming through in a very positive, hyper-masculine, alpha male, babyface, 22-year-old style. I mean, I don't think it's a good look. You'll notice, Deen, that I might do a few jabs here and there, but I don't actually insult you. I don't call you names. I don't need to. And also, it kind of like, it lets me know that I've kind of won this, right? You know? Like, it's kind of done, yeah? I mean, just between me and you, Deen. That's cool. Between us, we know what's going on.
The point is, even if there is elements of truth within the scriptures, it doesn't have to be fully preserved in order for it to attest to the Prophet Muhammad prophethood. The same way as Muslims today They can go to the Bible that they believe is corrupt, and they can still say, yeah, this Bible that contains parts of the Torah and Injeel attests to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being prophesied. I actually mentioned this in my video. I'll play the clips now to show you how disingenuous this guy is.
It's the book that they're reading. Like that's the important part. The book, right? Not if these, Jews, if he believes in Muhammad.
It doesn't matter. A book can be distorted, and you can still gather from it enough truths in order for you to use it as an evidence for a religion.
So your response, Deen, can be summarized very simply as the Quran can confirm something even if the majority of it is not compatible with the Quran. And I already did respond to that, Deen, in my previous video, where I pointed out that that means you're not actually confirming it then. You're actually refuting it, or disagreeing with it, admonishing it. These are all better words than confirm, especially if you can't affirm the majority of anything. I guess you should have watched my video a little bit closer, Deen. Which is weird, because you did apparently, because you show the whole thing. I'm pointing out to you that even if I were to not believe in absolute affirmation, which I do hold to, I haven't changed in that at all, I haven't moved, because it's correct and I can show you it is, even if I moved into just thinking it was a general affirmation, that would actually support my argument still and be against your argument, Deen.
No, like, Chris, you're just so low IQ. Do you not notice that when you bring up a hypothetical, like, oh, if I possibly grant this, you're saying it's possible that this is a false dichotomy, you idiots. You're saying it's possible that your argument, let's say I grant you it, there's a possibility that what we're saying now is a false dichotomy, because your guys' false dichotomy is either absolute, if it's absolute preservation, there's a true dilemma. That's what a dilemma is. You have one path or both paths, they're both problematic. But I just showed you it's a false dichotomy, and the fact that you're granting as possibly that there's a third option shows that it is a false dichotomy.
That went straight past your head, Deen. Not sure why you started talking about false dichotomies, given that I explained to you that both my position, that it's an absolute confirmation, means the Islamic dilemma passes, and your position, that it's a general confirmation, which I've made clear, must sensibly mean the majority in some sense. If that happens to be the case, then the Islamic dilemma also passes. I haven't conceded anything. In fact, I'm trying to show you how your own view supports me. I feel like you're helping me so much, but you don't realize what you're doing. Here I am, Deen. I've come here and I'm saying to you my argument that the Quran absolutely affirms the previous scriptures, the Torah and the Injeel, explicitly those. You then come along and say, well, actually, Chris, did you know that I think the Quran generally confirms the Torah and the Injeel? I then say, right, because if it did that, that would mean the Quran is agreeing with the majority of the contents of the Injeel and Torah, which would still mean the Islamic dilemma passes because you still have substantial contradictions on your hand. The only way you can get out of this, Deen, is that you have to argue that the Quran can in some way confirm the previous scriptures in a way that it only affirms tiny things of it that are not substantial, that are not the majority in any sense, but by doing so, you've just gone against your own Quran, because the Quran doesn't say that, it says it confirms it, not it cherry picks it, not it takes it in parts, takes some and then rejects others, not that it takes some categories and other categories, no, it confirms it because it believes in the majority of it in most cases. That's just gone straight past your head again, Deen, I can't help you. To Deen Responds editors who are watching this video, first of all, congratulations on $2,000 on your target to 20 grand. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit jealous. But can you please have a chat with Deen and try to explain to him why both absolutely confirming something and generally confirming something are both problematic if you find contradictions between two things that supposedly are meant to confirm each other? I don't think it's difficult, but I mean, what do I know? I'm just an old man. I'm like 53 or something, I don't know. Ask Deen, he knows. I can affirm the general themes in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You cannot, my friend. That's the whole point. You can't affirm that Jesus is the Son of God. You can't affirm that Jesus came down from heaven. You cannot affirm that Jesus knows all things. You cannot affirm the crucifixion.
That Jesus knows all things? Are you serious? That's the first thing. The second thing is that Jesus being called the Son of God, like I said before, I'm going to put on the screen again. Scholars in the past said it's possible. It's possible that you could call people in the past sons of God. And Jesus could have been the Son of God and an exclusive type of Son of God in terms of being the Messiah. There's no problem with that.
So first of all, he says, actually, it's possible that you can refer to presumably both the children of Israel and Christ's sonship in relation to the Father as being something that can be Islamically stated as long as you interpret it differently. So first of all, I think this is like weak as anything, right? This is the weakest. There have been scholars that have tried to reconcile this. I mean, this is basically the early Islamic scholars' approach, where they try to reconcile the Quran with the Injeel and the Torah by trying to interpret them differently in an Islamic sense so they could avoid the obvious Islamic dilemma that's coming if they affirm the Torah and the Injeel when they obviously contradict the Quran. But there's a reason they stopped doing this, and it's because it's not very convincing to anyone, including Muslims. Also, Deen, you would have to explain to me how it's permissible for a prophet like Isa to ascribe things to himself and to take on partnership by saying he is, in some real sense, it doesn't have to be a biological sense, Deen, but in some real sense, he is the son of the Father. So first of all, he's ascribing the term Father to Allah, which is not something that Allah would have told him, right, Deen? Second of all, he then takes on equality by saying, I am the son in a real sense, which again would be presumably committing shirk because he's taking on, in some sense, a position that is not warranted. In fact, the Quran makes it clear such a position isn't warranted for a prophet to be the unique monogamous son of God, of Allah. Have that conversation with your Muslim friends, Deen, see what they tell you. But he also ascribes things that weren't told to him. In other words, according to your view, Deen, you're now saying that Isa may have just made stuff up because, I don't know, that's a better position to take than affirming the Islamic dilemma? Damn, astaghfirullah. Not only that, you would have to, I guess you'd have to then say, with regards to the children of Israel thing, Isa, a prophet that is the Messiah, that is sent to the children of Israel as a corrector, presumably, because prophets should correct the people at that time if they have fallen into falsehood, is meant to correct them by saying, no, you're not the children in the way you understand it, because at that time they did understand it in a real sense, not a biological sense, in a real sense though, in a spiritual sense. Isa should have corrected that. But according to your view, it might be the case that no, Isa didn't correct that at all. Isa decided to instead double down on this falsehood that Allah never said, that has been falsely ascribed to prior Jewish prophets. Isa goes, you know what, guys? I'm cool with it. Let's just keep doing it, yeah? Allah's totally cool with you guys calling yourself the children of Allah in some real sense, in a spiritual sense. That's totally fine. You know what? I'm even the son as well, but in a different way. Check that out, guys. You're saying your Muslim prophet Isa might have done that? That's what Deen Responds just said, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't generally affirm the biographies of Jesus. I generally affirm the parables, sayings, and commandments and prophecies of the contents of those biographies, where they borrowed sayings of Jesus and morphed it into a biography.
First of all, even by entertaining the idea that it's just the words that Jesus spoke and not actually the accounts given by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is something you have to give evidence for. There is no immediate reason why Allah could not have sent down a book to Isa that contained the accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There isn't any reason why that could not have happened. After all, we find very similar styles of writing in the Torah and in the Quran. The Quran quotes other people. The Quran talks about history, poetry, prophecy, just like the Torah does and just like the Injeel does. Second of all, even if I don't say that and I say, actually, okay, it is the teachings that are given to Christ that he expressed and he spoke of, the Quran is clear in Surah 7:157 and elsewhere that the Quran considers the Torah and the Injeel to be what they have with them in a written format in the 7th century. There wasn't an account of just sayings by Jesus that existed in a written format in the 7th century in Arabia. There were accounts that quoted Jesus by all means, but now you're dealing with source material that's not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's something totally different. Not only that, but the historical context of, I don't know, the entirety of Christendom has the Injeel as being Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We know the etymology of the word Injeel. We know it comes from Evangelion. We know it comes from the Greek. We know what Christians thought about it. We know what the church, that is the Church of the East, the Byzantine Church, the Imperial Church, the Coptic Church, that being the Oriental Eastern Orthodox Church. We know what the Syriac Church said about it. There's no place to go to. If the Quran is a book for all mankind, then when it uses the general statement of Injeel, that is something that Christians had at that time, that was written down, any reasonable person would say, well, it's what they had then. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we look at the manuscript evidence from the 7th century, the 6th, the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd, and we go all the way back to figure out what that was. And we know what that was. It's the same things we read over and over again. Jesus is the Son of Man, the Son of God, the one who was crucified, the one who was resurrected. He came down from heaven. Those who have seen him have seen the Father. You give him the same honor that you give to the Father. When you pray, you can pray to him in his name and he will answer your prayers. So the historical context, combined with the fact that you believe the Quran is for all mankind, refute you here because we know what the Christians had at the time, and we know what the Christians that Muhammad and his companions and his wives interacted with at that time had. So unless you can give me evidence, again, there's that pesky thing called evidence coming back to bite you again, Deen. If you can give me evidence that they had some kind of written account of just the sayings, just like the theoretical Q source that you guys love so much, then fine, we'll accept it if you give us evidence. But you don't have any evidence, Deen, which is why I can just dismiss that and say, no, the mountain of evidence over here that we have from every historical account, every quoted work that talks about the Injeel, every actual manuscript of the Injeel, every church father talking about what they think the Injeel is, every non-Christian who ever talks about what they think the Injeel is, we can go through a plethora of material over 7 centuries and we can show you it's still the same thing we say today. Thematically, it's the same. You need to demonstrate otherwise.
And the crucifixion and resurrection passages of the Gospels do not make the majority of Jesus' statements. Actually, inshallah, after this, I'm going to do a whole study of the 4 Gospels, and I'm really going to show how much is reconcilable with Islam, how much actually aligns with Islam explicitly, how much explicitly goes against Islam, and how many of them actually would just be agnostic from our point of view. It could be one way or the other.
Now notice what you do here, because this is actually, first of all, I applaud you for doing this. This would ultimately be kind of the definitive end of this, which is that you go through the Gospels and that you highlight exactly what would be something you could affirm from an Islamic paradigm and what you couldn't, and therefore see if you can reasonably say that you can make a general confirmation of the Injeel, for example. I think the answer is quite evidently no. I would like to know the hermeneutic you use to come to these numbers, mostly because they're problematic even if I accept these. First of all, you've done this with just one gospel, which is Mark, which is probably the easiest from your paradigm because it has the lowest Christological claims in it. But even then, out of things that you can just directly affirm, it's 27.15%, which is not a majority. You then have another category called blue, which says Islamic themes spoken by Jesus but not explicitly confirmed. I have to be honest with you, I have no idea what you mean by that. But that seems to be the biggest category, which sounds like you're saying it's just things that Jesus says that Islam has also spoken about, but might not be saying the same thing, which would also be problematic for you because the Quran is supposedly confirming this at the time that the Quran is being revealed, which would mean they aren't compatible anymore because the Quran has superseded it, which means you cannot confirm something you're also simultaneously superseding. So that's problematic. Also, this is again giving you the benefit of the doubt and saying this is just Jesus' words. Again, historical context refutes that because no Christian had just an account of the words. Everything that are written down that Christians accepted as scripture, or the Injeel, or the good news, the gospel, was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and some funky heretical stuff from some other groups that the Quran quotes. And again, because we go by the Quran's understanding of this, it says it's a written text, and the only ones we know of are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the heretical stuff. Those are the things we should be working from because those were the ones that were in use in the 7th century at Muhammad's time, and we also know from the people he interacted with. The king of Aksum, for example, would not have had a random written copy of the Q source just laying around in Ethiopia. Like, we know he wouldn't have, Deen, because we know that the kingdom of Aksum at the time was a part of the Oriental Eastern Orthodox Church, and we know what their canon was, what they considered scripture and what they didn't consider scripture. And in your own Islamic narratives, King Negus supposedly says, after hearing parts of Surah 19, if I remember right, that this is compatible with what he knows, which is weird because we know what he would have known because we know the historical account of what the church that he was a ruler of in Ethiopia believed in. But I'm sure that Islamic history is totally legit and not just wishy-washy thinking. But I do applaud this. I do want to. I don't actually want to discourage you from doing this. I want you to do this, and I want you to document the way that you come up with these percentages. I'd be really interested to know that. I would also suggest you try doing some for the Gnostic sources as well, or just the apocryphal sources in general, because that would be intriguing from my point of view. Because I'd like to see whether or not you can affirm the Syriac infancy gospel. I have a funny feeling you couldn't, but Might be worth doing. But yeah, I am holding you to this, Dean. I'm going to say now in this video, I expect this to be done, for the Gospel of Mark at least, with a report showing your findings and the hermeneutics and the methodology you use to get to these numbers. I expect that to be done in, you say, the next 2 months. Okay, so let's say, I'll give you a bit longer. Let's say by the end of July, I expect to see this, because I would love to see it, and it would be edifying to everyone who watches. So please do this. I am encouraging you to do that. So the main features being like the main themes found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, for example. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. So you've got the crucifixion, the resurrection, Jesus' claims to divinity, Old Testament passages that apply to Jesus.
Yeah, you're just assuming that, Chris. Like the crucifixion and resurrection aren't the main themes of the Gospels.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Dean just tried to tell us that one of the main themes of the Christian Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is not Christ's death on the cross. It's just like a side note, you know? I mean, it's not like the entire Gospels are leading up to this very moment. They actually look at the Gospel of Mark. How many times Jesus talks about knowing his death is coming, which, by the way, that's not Islamic, Dean. Jesus hasn't died yet, according to Islam, Dean. But anyway, Jesus repeatedly predicts his own death, saying that he will be a living sacrifice. He will be a sacrifice to many. Mark 10:45. I mean, the very prologue of John, like, just ignore these. They're not actually big things. It's not as if that's crucial to the very main objectives and narratives that the authors are trying to convey. Yeah, that's laughable, Dean. That's laughable. I don't even think Muslims will agree with you there. Any Muslim who's read any of the Gospels will be like, yeah, that crucifixion bit was pretty intense. That was kind of like the author was really trying to emphasize that bit. You know, maybe because when the tomb was empty, that had something to do with it. I don't know, man. That is like the most unprobable argument I think I've ever heard. That it turns out Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were never really about the crucifixion and the resurrection. No, it's just a big side note. My gosh, I'm so glad I'm not on that argument. I'm so glad that I'm on the other side of that. Imagine having to believe that. Dean, you know, like Muslims can read, right? They can just pick up a gospel and read it. All right, okay. You do you, Dean. You do you.
Actually, if you look at Kloppenberg's work on the Q Gospel, the earliest Gospel, Jesus never talks about his crucifixion and resurrection. And this is meant to be the earliest Gospel according to critical scholars. And these are the elements of this earliest Gospel is found within Matthew and Luke.
I actually get to summarize this real quick because a good friend of mine, Rob from Centrality Apologetics, saw your video, Dean. After he finished laughing, he decided it'd be great to make a response to you, and he did a live stream where he went through the latest research on the Q Gospel, academic research, and he actually went through many of the passages in one of the formulations of the Q Gospel that does actually make reference to the crucifixion. He even quotes an academic's opinion about that. You even kind of give the game away yourself when you show that quote on screen where it says, no direct reference. Not indirect, because there actually are indirect references that Jesus says in the Q Gospel variations, because there's lots of them, Dean. There are many different academic perspectives on what this hypothetical document could have in it, and they don't all agree, Dean. So, bit awkward that you're trying to say that the Q Gospel is the Injeel when which one? Like, you don't even know you don't even know which one it is. So it's not even as if you can point to something and say that's it. You have to be like, well, that could be it, but it could also be this one, this one, this one, or this one. Some of which are less and less probable for you, Dean, because they include more and more anti-Islamic, unreconcilable statements that Jesus made. But anyway, I'll just play the best bits from Rob's video here. Let Rob do the work for me. I mean, I don't get paid for this, so let's watch.
So this is by Marcus Tywald, the saying source, a commentary on Q. And it's a German publisher, but it was recently translated. So the German work was published in 2019, but the English translation of the German work was published in 2020. So this is the latest on Q. Now, if you just keyword search passion, for example. So he says about taking up the cross. He's like, look. This reflects apocalyptic beliefs that in the last days, all fleshy bonds would be disrupted and God would create his new family. For Jesus, as for Q, the end of times has already come. Additionally, conflicts between the historical Jesus and his own family are present in text beyond the saying source, and there's all the relevant stuff, right? And so then taking up one's cross, right? So the combination of the two sayings only makes sense, notice this, only makes sense in post-Easter times from the perspective of Jesus' passion. Thus, taking up one's cross most probably is a post-Easter construction that Q has linked to this hating one's family saying. Even if the saying source does not mention Jesus' death and resurrection explicitly, being understandable given the strong focus on sayings, Q nevertheless, now notice this language, Q nevertheless knew about Jesus' crucifixion as this text demonstrates.
Like, for example, monotheism, believing in God's laws, working with God's laws.
He gives the example of monotheism as a subcategory he generally believes in. Bro, you would still have to throw out most of the stuff in there. You take the Injeel, Jesus, when talking explicitly about monotheism, first of all, explicit statements in the New Testament about just explicitly monotheism, not that many. So you're already talking about a minority of the actual text. So well done for confirming a minority position on the text, not a general position. Second of all,
So he's saying that the Gospels don't highlight monotheism much? Like, are you serious? You got Mark 10:18, you got John 17:3, you've got other passages where Jesus prays to the Father alone. These are all like texts, proof texts from Jesus, peace be upon him, statement himself about monotheism. Does he not believe Jesus was preaching monotheism as a main theme? Are you serious?
wow, Dean. Wow. What a way to try to mischaracterize someone's point. Did you notice I used the word explicitly? I used the word explicitly more than once in that statement because I wanted to be very clear. Not like the unclear verses in the Quran, but I wanted to be very clear when I meant I am affirming that in the Gospels, when Jesus explicitly talks about monotheism in particular, not indirectly, not through reference or through quotations, but directly addressing it, that makes up a vast minority of the overall text of the Gospels. Obviously it does. And then to refute this, you say, oh, I don't think that monotheism is a big thing. No, it is a big thing. It's just not explicitly talked about because Jesus was talking to Jews, Dean. He was talking to Jews. What Jews, Dean, do you know that weren't monotheist at the time of Isa? Isa did not need to go up to Jews and explain to them how there's only one God. He would have been laughed out of synagogues and out of temple because they would have thought he would be a fool. This is why Jesus doesn't need to talk about monotheism explicitly in the Gospels. Is it a big theme? Yes, in the sense that Jesus is affirming it, in an absolute sense. Just so you know. And then what makes this even worse is you try and make your point sound more profound by giving examples, to which you gave two, and then you gave two verses. Actually, you know what, Dean? Let's do some math, right? Let's do it. Let's see how many verses there are in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John combined, and compare that to the two verses that you gave as a reference. Quick Google search says 3,779 verses in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John combined. Now, when you point out two, Dean, and then you refer to like Jesus praying to the Father as some sort of, oh, this is like some direct explicit reference of monotheism, well, you know what, let's just say yes. Why not? Like, I feel like helping you at this point. Okay, yes, that is also. So let's double it. Let's say now, actually, let's triple it. Let's say there's now 6 verses out of the 3,779 verses, Dean, that are actually talking about monotheism. Well done, Dean. Well done. Clearly, monotheism is all the Injeel ever talks about as a central topic. It's not assumed at all to the Jews, who were the main audience of the Gospels in Jesus' time, in Jesus' ministry. Sometimes I wonder why I bother with these videos, man. Like, do you think he's going to learn? Like,
As well as the fact that being called father, like I mentioned before, I already refuted this in the debate, Chris. Like, you're so disingenuous. It's crazy. It's possible that the prophets did call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala father in the past. There's no problem in granting this.
once again, Dean, real quick, just to summarize, you have just confirmed that prophets did actually speak words that they had not heard from Allah and ascribed it to Allah without having the authority to do so. So the doctrine of Isma, the infallibility of prophets, their sinlessness, you've just chucked out the bin. Well done. Your Sunni brothers and sisters must absolutely love you at dinner parties. And now, ladies and gentlemen, onto another section of Dean's amazing response, where he basically just wants to talk about the Bible and stop talking about the Islamic Dilemma. Make a response. Like, I want to hear how you respond to this. I'd be super interested.
No, I'm trying to know if you guys have read like Gordon Nichols' book.
You didn't put my response. Oh my god. Guys, this will be the highlight of this response. He skipped over the Matthew 23 response that I made. He purposefully skipped over it. He purposefully, let me repeat, skipped over the part where Jesus says to obey everything the Pharisees teach. And he said, there's no practical example you can give me where general doesn't mean majority. I gave you Matthew 23, you imbecile, and you skipped over it purposefully. Man.
Why is it, Deen? Why does Matthew 23 have anything to do with the Islamic dilemma? Why? At best, Deen, it would show that I'm inconsistent. But even if I'm inconsistent, that's your whole point. Your whole point, Deen, in the debate we had was that you are okay with being inconsistent. You literally apply different metrics to different books in order to warrant your view and solve the Islamic dilemma. But if I am inconsistent, supposedly, about this thing that totally is relevant to the Islamic dilemma and not just a massive jump to the Bible, you have an issue with that now? When you yourself said that you were happy using inconsistent approaches? So why can't I, Deen? But you know what, let's give Deen the opportunity to refute me here. Deen, explain to me how, if you're correct about Matthew 23, how that solves the Islamic dilemma. Specifically for Muslims, that it means that Muslims should not worry about the Islamic dilemma being true because of Matthew 23. Please explain that to me, Deen.
This has to be the last response against this guy, and no one can blame me for this.
This has to be my last response to this guy, and no one can blame me for this. I should just do this whole video. I should just like compile all the excuses that Deen gives. It'd just be like, this is basically what Deen's trying to say. Look, he's too young to be debating me. I'm too old. He's too poor. His editors want too much money. I didn't talk about Matthew 23 because that's relevant to the Islamic dilemma for some reason. He doesn't have to debate me again because... Deen, just stop with the excuses, man. It's not looking good for you. Just stick with reading Mark and trying to figure out how you can make it Islamic. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully after I'm done editing this, it's not too long, but we'll see. We'll see what it looks like. But anyway, God bless you all. I hope you have a great day. I'm looking forward to your response, Deen, and I'm looking forward to when you complete the Gospel of Mark and you show how the majority of the Gospel of Mark is actually compatible with the Quran, and you explain the methodology that you use to do that. Very much look forward to it. Anyway, God bless you all. I hope you all have a great day. That includes you, Deen. Take care.